Hey everybody, welcome to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron. Haven't really been filming much the last couple days, but I've gotten a lot of stuff done, so I'm going to go through and give you an update, and then we're going to get started on another little project. So project Longstep, the body shop. My buddy's almost done with the fenders and inner fenders for it, so I wanted to try to get as much done that needs to be done under the hood before I put the fenders on, so I'm not having to do a lot of leaning over the fenders that are freshly painted to get it done. So we got the wiper assembly put in, got the booster master cylinder for the brakes, put the core support on, cold case radiator, dual electric fans, got the condenser and dryer assembly for the vintage air put in, and I guess that's about it. Working on getting the right belts for it, radiator hoses, stuff like that. So just kind of trying to knock that stuff out. Next project we're gonna do today, a buddy of mine just bought a new truck and he wants me to go over the whole truck before he starts driving it. So I'm gonna show you what I do when I buy a new vehicle, or when somebody buys a new vehicle and brings it to me and wants me to look over it for them. So I'm gonna go through the process of what I do for that, and I'm gonna put it all on here for you guys. So we have a 1983 GMC 3500 flatbed. Pretty nice little truck. At some point in time, somebody's gone through and did a little bit of body work, painted it, put a seat cover on it, got one of these plastic dash covers for it. It's a 4x4 with SM465 manual trans. The guy that he bought it from said that once it warms up, it loses oil pressure. But I can't get it to show any oil pressure on the aftermarket gauge that they have in it, even when it's cold. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I went and bought a oil pressure gauge. And I'm gonna put a brand new oil pressure gauge in there and fire it up, see what I can do. They've got this weird T. I don't know how well you can see it, but they got this weird T down here with the factory gauge still in it. And they got an aftermarket oil pressure thing coming out of it, and it's all kind of wonky. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull all that out and put the new gauge in, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so I got my gauge installed. I'm just leaving it right here by the hood hinge for now. We find out this thing doesn't have any oil pressure and we got to rebuild the motor then, or swap the motor or whatever. No rush to put the oil pressure gauge in. You guys are about to find out another known problem this truck has here in a second. Yep, that right there. Doesn't sound normal to me. I've got another starter for it. Pretty sure the reason that it's doing that is because it either has a automatic transmission starter in it or it wasn't shimmed properly. So either way, pretty sure after however long it's been doing it, the teeth are damn near worn off the starter anyways. So I got a new starter for it. We'll go ahead and put that in. But once again, I want to make sure we got oil pressure, because if we don't, it don't do any good to change the starter if I'm gonna have to pull it out. So let this keep this thing running. Seems like it's gonna stay running on its own now. So looks like we got 40 pounds of oil pressure, almost 40 pounds of oil pressure at an idle cold. Not great, but not terrible. I don't know how much or how new this oil in this motor is. I bought stuff to do an oil change. We'll get to that, but once again, I wanted to make sure the thing was decent before I put fresh oil in it, because if we're going to change the motor, why put fresh oil in it? So I'm gonna let it sit here and warm up for a little bit. Once it gets warmed up, we'll go back to it and check it again and see where our oil pressure's at. Okay, we let it run for a little bit. Got it up to operating temp for at least what it's going to get to sitting here idling. It's about 165. It's about where it sits when you let it just sit there and idle. And I got a fan blowing on it to blow the exhaust out of the shop, but we're sitting right above 30, which really isn't that bad. I mean, you give it a little bit of throttle. Still increases pressure, that's good. So I'm gonna tell my buddy, just run this motor for a while until it gives up. I mean, it's not that bad. I've seen way worse. I've driven stuff that had 5 pounds oil pressure after it warmed up and it was fine. So we're gonna shut her off, let it cool down a little bit, and then we'll start figuring out what's going on with that starter. All right, I got the starter pulled out of the truck, and that's the one that came out. Looks brand new, but it's the wrong one. I think this is probably, I don't know for sure without looking it up, but I think this one's probably for an automatic transmission. This one's for the manual. So when I pulled the starter out, I looked in there, and the Bendix is just barely making contact with the flywheel. If you look at the difference here between these two starters, the nub on this one sticks out further, which doesn't let the nose cone go in as far. And they had it kind of bound up on the bolts, where this one's shorter and has a shorter nose cone, which will let it get in closer to the starter, or closer to the flywheel, and it'll let it engage. And luckily it came with some shims. So the wiring going to it has a bunch of butt connectors in it, spliced where it doesn't need to be. It's kind of a mess, so I'm gonna get under there and fix that. We're gonna throw this starter in without any shims, and then we'll go hit the key and see what happens. Okay, so that was definitely the wrong starter. I got the new starter in. It fits a lot better, bolted up a lot better. I got all the wiring cleaned up and fixed, hooked the battery back up. So we're going to hop in the truck, hit the starter for the first time, see what it sounds like. A lot better. Sounds like it might need a shim. It's a lot better than it was. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick a shim in there and see what happens. All right, I had to do a little bit more messing around with the starter. I got that new starter in and cranked it up a few times, as you saw, and after about 4 or 5 cranks, it kind of popped out of space again and started making noise. So I went under there and got to looking around, and they had the wrong bolts in with the wrong starter. So if you don't know this, somewhere around, I want to say 82 to 85, somewhere in there, they went from a standard starter to a metric starter, and the thickness of the bolts is different. So if you have a metric starter, you have to use metric bolts. If you have a standard starter, you have to use standard bolts, and you have to have the right starter for the right thread in the block. So a metric starter will fit and work, but with standard bolts, but you put the bolts in and you got a lot of torque in your starter, it'll move it and everything won't be lined up and it won't work out right. So something to check if you're having starter problems. The next known issue on this truck that we're gonna address is the Hydroboost. All the lines up top and everything are dry, but the whole bottom of it's covered in power steering fluid. It's leaking all over the place. So we're going to, the truck came with one when my buddy bought it. So we're gonna go ahead and pop that off and swap it out. You gotta take off the return line, the pressure line from the pump, the pressure line to the box. Pop these 2 bolts off, slide your master cylinder forward, and then there's 4 bolts down here that you have to take off from the inside, and they'll make you say a lot of cuss words doing it. So I'm going to get that knocked out real quick, and then we can get to where I'm actually showing you what you need to check out when you buy something new. Okay, we're back. I got the Hydroboost installed, and I went ahead and put a new carburetor on it. Edelbrock AVS2. And the reason I did that is because the Quadrajet that was on here, you might be able to see it earlier in the video, somebody had broken off the tabs that hold the accelerator pump, and then went back and JB welded it back together. JB welded over the bolt that held the carburetor down, and I happened to notice in between the top plate and the base of the carburetor there was bright orange silicone, and you never put silicone near gas. And the truck was running really rich, and I had a feeling that somebody had messed with that carburetor, and that's why it was dumping fuel. So rather than sit there and play around with it all day with a broken carburetor, talked to the buddy of mine that owns this truck, and he said let's put a new one on. He wants it to be dependable and reliable and all that good stuff, so we threw a new carburetor on it. The way that I know it's been running really rich is because I do a little bit of homework before I start taping for you guys, and so I can make sure I have most of the parts to make these videos without having to wait a lot. Doesn't always work out that way, but sometimes it does. So I'm gonna go ahead. Another thing that you always want to do when you buy a used vehicle, especially something older that's carbureted, is pull out a spark plug. As you can see, these spark plugs are really wet and they are extremely carboned up. Now, I don't have smell-o-vision, so I can't really help you guys do this, but if you smell the tip of this if you smell the tip of this plug, you'll know that the wetness smells like gas. It's not oil. And the truck's been smoking when it's been running, and it smells really bad, like fuel, like it burns your eyes and whatnot. So I know it's not just oil smoke. Some of it's oil smoke, but I'm assuming that carburetor was dumping so much fuel it was washing the rings out. So our low oil pressure issue could have something to do with the oil being broken down, because you pull the dipstick out, it reeks like gas. This thing's just been dumping fuel in this motor. So I'm gonna go ahead, I changed the carburetor, I'm gonna go ahead and change the plugs, I'm gonna check the timing, and then we're gonna do an oil change on it and see how that does. But I'm not really going through step by step everything that I'm doing on the truck this video. This is more of an informational video of this is what you do, what to look for when you get a new vehicle. So once again, I found a rich problem because I checked the spark plugs. That's real important. And 50-50 either way. It could be the other way. You could pull a spark plug out and it could be really lean. You're not getting fuel, which could be timing, could be carburetor, could be vacuum leaks. It's just kind of stuff you want to check, because just because something runs halfway decent when you get it doesn't mean you can't make it run great. So that's what we're trying to do here. He bought this truck knowing that it was low on power and low on oil pressure, and he thought the motor was worn out, and he was talking to me about putting a new motor in it, and I told him let's see what we can do with this old one, because we might be able to freshen it up. And I think we've pretty well done that, but we'll find out here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and change these spark plugs out, do a little tuning on this carburetor, check the timing, and then we'll move on and look at something else. So I'm still having some starter problems with this truck. I ordered another starter and I'm having trouble getting one. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the rest of the stuff that I do on a new truck when I buy it, or somebody brings me one that they just bought, to check everything out. And then we'll get through this one and move on to the next one. So obviously You walk around and look at the tires, and these tires look pretty new, and the tread's all smooth on them. There's no cupping or uneven wear or anything like that, so that's a good sign. I jacked it up before a little bit ago, and when you got it jacked up in the air, you grab both sides of the tire at the same time and kind of slowly wiggle it back and forth and see if you get any play there. You're gonna have some from the steering, but if you got a second person that can help you out, you can have them look underneath and see if anything's moving it's not supposed to, and then you grab the tire up at the top and at the bottom and wiggle it in and out, see if you got any play there. That'll tell you if your ball joints and your tie rods are worn out. I check the U-joints, get under there on the drive shaft and move it up and down and back and forth and make sure it doesn't move. You might get a little bit, but there shouldn't be much, if any. Just check everything for leaks. This truck's got a couple of oil leaks. Valve covers for sure are leaking, and might have a small power steering leak, but that's probably just an O-ring in the box, so I'll take care of that. When I check for play in the front end, I always grease it first, because if it's been driven for a long time and doesn't have any grease in it, it's gonna have some play. Just because there's no grease, there's supposed to be a tolerance in those parts so they can move a little bit, and then when you put the grease in, it fills up that void and kind of cushions it. So I always grease everything before I check it, and I greased everything on this truck: driveline, steering components, ball joints, everything that takes grease I already greased. And check the front end, it's all tight. Check the driveline, it's good. Check the fluids in. If it's four-wheel drive, obviously you have a front and rear diff, which this one is, so I checked the fluid in the front diff, check the fluid in the rear diff, check the fluid in the manual transmission. We changed the oil, check the brake fluid, and then just kind of do a walk around and make sure that everything is how it's supposed to be. And if you don't know how it's supposed to be, then you can go online and look, and just kind of, if you see something that seems kind of weird to you, then you just go online and search it and look at how it's supposed to be and go from there. I was going to show you checking the lights and stuff, but I've got the battery disconnected because I got the starter out. But turn your lights on, walk around, check all your lights, lean a piece of wood or something on the brake pedal, or if you got somebody else helping you, have them step on the brake pedal, go back, check the brake lights, check all your running lights, check your headlights, check your low beams, check your high beams. Turn the key on, put it in reverse, go back and see if your reverse lights are on. Sometimes they work off a pressure switch, so if it's not running, it won't work, but sometimes they do. Most of the time you got a fan clutch on your fan, and you want to check that and make sure it's good, because if the fan clutch is bad, the fan's not going to kick in when it's supposed to, and then you could have overheating problems. This one doesn't have a fan clutch, it's just got a direct drive fan. But other than that, we got this thing fixed up. I fixed a few things on it. Like I said, I greased it. I went through some of the repairs that we've already made on it. Changed the oil. Checked all the fluids, greased everything. There was some little stuff, like the knob was missing off of the headlight switch, so we went ahead and replaced that. Other than that, somebody's put a seat cover in this at one time. Got this dash cover on it. It's a pretty clean old truck, but I just want to do a quick video, kind of mainly tell you guys stuff to look at and look over when you buy an older truck, just to kind of help out a little bit. So that's going to do it for this video. I appreciate all you guys watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, good, bad, other, and y'all have a good one, and we'll see you next time.